Today, I want to talk about something deeply personal, something that many of us experience but rarely discuss openly: family rejection. Family is supposed to be a place of love, support, and understanding. From the moment we are born, we depend on our family for guidance, security, and a sense of belonging. But what happens when the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally turn their backs on you? What happens when you feel like an outcast among your own blood? Rejection from strangers is painful, but rejection from family cuts deeper than anything else. It can leave you feeling lost, unloved, and questioning your self-worth. You may ask yourself, what did I do wrong? Why am I not good enough? Why can't they see my efforts? But here's the truth: family rejection is a complex issue. It's rarely black and white. It's not always about who is right and who is wrong. Sometimes it's about misunderstandings, unhealed wounds, and generational patterns that no one has taken the time to break. Today, I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to help you understand why this happens and what you can do about it. Because understanding is the first step to healing. We will explore 5 crucial reasons why your family may have rejected you, and more importantly, how you can respond in a way that leads to growth rather than bitterness. No matter how painful your situation may be, remember this: rejection is not the end of your story. It can either break you or shape you into something greater, and the choice is yours. Now, let's dive into the first reason: the role of personal responsibility. Rejection is one of the hardest things a person can experience, especially when it comes from family. It's painful, confusing, and often feels unfair. But before we blame others, there's an uncomfortable question we must ask ourselves. Have I contributed to this rejection in any way? This is not about self-blame or guilt-tripping yourself. It's about self-reflection, one of the most powerful tools for personal growth. If multiple people in your family have distanced themselves from you, it's important to pause and ask, is there something I am doing or have done that might be causing this? One of the hardest truths in life is this: we are not always the heroes of our own stories. Sometimes we play a role in our own struggles without even realizing it. Maybe we've been too harsh with our words. Maybe we've hurt people unintentionally. Maybe we've made choices that, from our perspective, seemed right but were perceived as hurtful by others. Think about this: if you keep facing the same conflict with multiple family members, there's a chance that part of the issue is within you. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. It simply means that, like everyone else, you have areas in your character that need work. Recognizing this is not weakness, it's strength. Self-awareness allows us to improve and repair broken relationships. It helps us see our blind spots, areas where we might have acted selfishly, impulsively, or without considering the emotions of others. But here's the challenge: most people resist self-examination because it's uncomfortable. It's easier to believe that our family is wrong, unfair, or simply doesn't understand us. And while that might be true in some cases, it's not the full picture. Take a moment and ask yourself, have I been too quick to judge my family members? Have I ignored their feelings while focusing only on my own? Have I broken their trust in any way? Have I communicated openly? Or have I expected them to understand me without explaining? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Sometimes the rejection we experience is a consequence of past behavior that we haven't yet owned up to. Maybe we've been too stubborn to admit when we were wrong. Maybe pride has kept us from apologizing. But here's the good news: if part of the problem lies with us, that means we have the power to change it. Taking personal responsibility doesn't mean taking all the blame. It simply means recognizing where we can improve and making the effort to do so. If you suspect that your actions or words may have contributed to your family's rejection, you can take steps to repair the damage. Reflect honestly. Be brutally honest with yourself. Look at the situation from the perspective of your family members. How might they have felt? Apologize if necessary. A sincere apology can rebuild bridges that seem completely broken. But an apology should be genuine, not just words, but backed by real change. Work on yourself. If your past behavior has hurt your family, work on becoming a better version of yourself. Show them through actions, not just words, that you are growing. Communicate clearly. Sometimes families reject a person not because they dislike them, but because there has been a breakdown in communication. Be open, be vulnerable, and listen as much as you speak. Not all rejection is your fault. Some families reject people for unfair reasons, differences in beliefs, life choices, or personal growth that makes them uncomfortable. But before you assume that's the case, examine yourself first. Because if there's even a small chance that you can fix things, wouldn't it be worth trying? At the end of the day, you can't control how your family feels about you, but you can control how you behave. And sometimes, the best way to heal a broken relationship is to take the first step even when it's hard. Unconscious patterns, generational trauma. Family rejection is rarely just about one event or one misunderstanding. Often it's part of something much bigger, unconscious patterns and generational trauma that have been passed down through the family for years, maybe even decades. Think about this. Do your family members have a history of broken relationships? Are there old grudges that never seem to heal? If so, you may not be the first person in your family to experience rejection. You might just be the latest link in a long chain of unresolved conflicts, emotional wounds, and dysfunctional patterns. Understanding generational trauma. Generational trauma happens when pain, fear, or unresolved issues get passed down from one generation to the next. A parent who grew up in a household where love was rarely expressed might struggle to show affection to their own children. A family that experienced deep betrayal in the past may develop a culture of distrust, making it hard for members to fully support each other. This kind of trauma isn't always obvious. Many times, family members don't even realize they are carrying wounds from the past. Instead, they react in ways that seem normal to them, but are actually responses to old pain. If your family has rejected you, it might not be because of something you did. It could be because of the emotional baggage they have been carrying for years. For example, if your parents grew up in an environment where expressing emotions was seen as weakness, they may reject you for being open and vulnerable. If past generations in your family experienced abandonment, they may push people away before they can be hurt. If there has always been a culture of strict control, your decision to live differently may be seen as a betrayal. These patterns are often unconscious, meaning that your family members may not even realize why they are acting the way they are. They may genuinely believe that their rejection of you is justified, when in reality, they are just repeating a cycle that has existed for generations. Breaking the cycle. The difficult truth is that if no one in the family makes an effort to break these patterns, they will continue indefinitely. But here's the good news: you have the power to change things. Even if your family doesn't recognize their own unhealthy patterns, you can choose to step out of them. Here's how. Recognize the patterns. Take an honest look at your family's history. Do certain conflicts keep repeating? Are there common themes in the way family members treat each other? Identifying these patterns is the first step to breaking free from them. Don't take it personally. If your family has rejected you, it may not actually be about you at all. It might be about their own fears, insecurities, and past experiences. Understanding this can help you avoid unnecessary guilt and self-doubt. Set boundaries where necessary. Sometimes breaking a cycle means choosing not to participate in it. If your family's rejection is toxic and harmful, you have every right to protect yourself. That doesn't mean you stop loving them, it just means you prioritize your mental and emotional well-being. Be the change. If you want a healthier, more supportive family dynamic, start with yourself. Be the one who listens, who forgives, who communicates openly. You might not be able to change the past, but you can set a new example for the future. Seek healing. Whether through self-reflection, faith, therapy, or personal growth, work on healing any wounds you might be carrying from your family. When you heal yourself, you also stop the cycle from continuing to the next generation. Rejection is painful, but sometimes it's not about you at all. It's about patterns that existed long before you were born, patterns that your family may not even realize they are following. Understanding this won't make the rejection hurt any less, but it will help you see things with clarity. You have a choice. You can let these patterns define you, or you can break free from them and create something better, not just for yourself, but for future generations. Because at the end of the day, someone has to break the cycle. Why not you? The fear of change. One of the most frustrating and painful experiences in life is realizing that the people who should support you, your own family, are rejecting you not because you've done something wrong, but because you've changed. Change is a natural part of life. People grow, evolve, and learn new things. But here's the harsh truth. Not everyone is comfortable with change, especially when it happens to someone close to them. Have you ever noticed that when you start improving yourself, whether it's by pursuing education, deepening your faith, changing your habits, or setting new goals, some people don't celebrate you. Instead, they distance themselves. They criticize you. They act like you're doing something wrong when all you're doing is trying to become a better version of yourself. Why does this happen? Because your change challenges them. Why people fear change in others. Your growth exposes their insecurities. Many people get stuck in life. They settle into routines, avoid challenges, and convince themselves that they don't need to improve. But when someone close to them, especially a family member, starts changing, it forces them to reflect on their own life. Suddenly they start asking themselves uncomfortable questions. Why haven't I improved? Am I wasting my potential? Instead of facing these questions, it's easier for them to criticize you and push you away. They feel left behind. Families often develop unspoken expectations about how things should be. Everyone plays a role. One person is the responsible one, another is the funny one, another is the one who always needs help. But when you start changing, you disrupt the balance. Your family may fear that they no longer understand you or that they will lose their connection to you. This fear can make them reject you as a way to maintain the familiar dynamic. They misinterpret your intentions. Sometimes, when you try to improve yourself, your family sees it as an insult to them. If you come from a background where no one values education and you decide to pursue higher studies, they might see it as you looking down on them. If you start taking your health seriously and changing your diet, they might think you're judging their lifestyle. Even if you have no intention of making them feel bad, they may perceive your growth as a silent criticism of their choices. They are afraid of losing you. Change often comes with new priorities. Maybe you become more focused on your career, faith, or personal development, and you no longer engage in the same conversations or activities as before. Your family might reject you as a way of expressing their fear that they are losing the old version of you. Even though their rejection hurts, it's often coming from a place of deep insecurity and attachment. How to deal with rejection due to change. Stay confident in your growth. Never shrink yourself to make others comfortable. If your changes are positive and aligned with your values, keep going. Your journey is about becoming the best version of yourself, not making others approve of you. Communicate with understanding. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, try to explain your growth in a way that reassures your family. Let them know that just because you're changing doesn't mean you love them any less. Accept that not everyone will support you. Some family members may never fully understand or accept your transformation. That's okay. Your growth is not a betrayal. It's a necessity. Find a supportive community. If your family is rejecting you for evolving, seek out people who support your journey. Whether it's friends, mentors, or a faith-based community, surrounding yourself with the right people can help you stay strong. Be patient, but know when to move on. Some family members may need time to adjust. Others may never accept your changes. You don't have to force them to understand. Focus on your growth, and if they come around, great. If they don't let their rejection stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. Rejection due to change is one of the hardest things to accept because it often comes from people we love the most. But remember this, you are not responsible for their fears. Your life is yours to live, and true love should never come with conditions that require you to stay the same. Keep growing. Keep evolving. One day they may realize that your change was never a threat, it was an opportunity for them to grow too. The need for boundaries. One of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that not everyone who is close to you has the right to unlimited access to your life, even family. Boundaries are essential in any relationship, but in many families, the idea of setting boundaries is seen as disrespectful or even offensive. Many people who experience rejection from their families don't understand that sometimes rejection is actually a reaction to their attempt to create healthy space. If your family has rejected you, there's a strong chance that you either set boundaries that they didn't like, refused to tolerate toxic behavior, chose a different path in life that required separation. Understanding the importance of boundaries and why some families react negatively to them is key to dealing with rejection in a mature and healthy way. What are boundaries and why do they matter? A boundary is simply a line that protects your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. It's a way of saying, this is what I will accept. This is what I won't tolerate. This is how I expect to be treated. Without boundaries, relationships become chaotic. People can take advantage of you, disrespect you, or drain your energy without consequences. Families, in particular, struggle with boundaries because they believe that being family means there should be no limits. But here's the truth: love without boundaries is not love. It's control. If a family member only accepts you when you do what they want, that's not love, that's manipulation. If they expect you to tolerate abuse, disrespect, or toxic behavior just because you are related, that's not love, that's entitlement. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect, not blind obedience. Why families struggle with boundaries. If your family has rejected you after you set boundaries, here are some reasons why. They are used to having control over you. In many families, especially those with strict cultural or traditional values, parents or elders expect their children to obey without question. From a young age, you may have been taught to always listen, never argue, and put family above everything. But as you grow, you realize that blind obedience is not the same as love. You start forming your own thoughts, making your own choices, and standing up for yourself. This challenges the old power dynamic. When you refuse to be controlled, some family members might see it as disrespect, even though in reality, you are simply becoming independent. If your family has rejected you because you started thinking for yourself, it's not your fault. It's a sign that they were more comfortable with you being dependent than being your own person. They believe that family means no boundaries. Some families have an unspoken rule: we share everything, we control everything, and we interfere in each other's lives. They believe that being family means having unlimited access to your personal life, your relationships, your finances, your decisions. If you try to create space, they take it as an insult. For example, if you refuse to discuss personal matters with them, they accuse you of being secretive. If you don't follow their advice, they say you are ungrateful. If you prioritize your own well-being, they call you selfish. The problem isn't that you are doing something wrong. The problem is that they don't respect individual boundaries. If they reject you for protecting your own life, it's because they don't understand the difference between healthy closeness and unhealthy control. They are offended that you stop tolerating toxicity. Some families function in toxic ways without even realizing it. They normalize behavior like constant criticism, emotional manipulation, gossip and backstabbing, disrespecting personal space, using guilt to control others. When you decide that you will no longer tolerate toxic behavior, it can make some family members uncomfortable. Why? Because your tolerance made things easier for them. For example, if you used to tolerate being insulted or belittled, and now you stand up for yourself, they might accuse you of changing or being too sensitive. But in reality, you are just enforcing a standard of respect that should have existed from the beginning. If your family rejects you because you refuse to accept their toxic behavior, remember, that's their problem, not yours. They feel guilty but don't want to admit. When you set boundaries, it forces people to reflect on their own behavior. Some family members might feel guilty about how they've treated you in the past, but instead of apologizing or changing, they choose to push you away. Why? Because admitting they were wrong is harder than rejecting you. This happens a lot in families where parents feel guilty for past mistakes but refuse to acknowledge them. Siblings feel envious of your growth but pretend they don't care. Relatives feel bad for disrespecting you but blame you instead. If your family rejects you instead of taking responsibility, understand that it's not because you did something wrong. It's because they don't want to face the truth. When rejection becomes a path to self-discovery. Rejection is painful, especially when it comes from family, the very people who are supposed to love, support, and accept you. But what if rejection isn't just an ending? What if it's actually a beginning? Many of the most successful, wise, and fulfilled people in history went through periods of rejection, isolation, and loneliness. Why? Because rejection often forces a person to go on a journey of self-discovery. It removes the external noise and expectations, leaving you with one powerful question. Who am I, really? It's easy to define ourselves through the roles we play in our family. The obedient child, the responsible sibling, the caretaker, the one who never causes problems, the one who always follows traditions. But what happens when you grow beyond those roles? What happens when you start thinking for yourself, making different choices, or stepping into your own identity? Often, that's when rejection comes. But here's the truth. When people reject you for becoming your true self, it's a sign that you're on the right path. Why rejection can be a blessing in disguise. As painful as it is, rejection can be the doorway to a stronger, more authentic version of yourself. Here's how. Rejection forces you to find your own voice. Many people spend their entire lives trying to please others, especially family. They suppress their own desires, beliefs, and dreams just to fit in. But when you are rejected, suddenly you no longer have to live by their expectations. This can feel terrifying at first, like being thrown into the deep end of the ocean without a life jacket. But over time, you start realizing something. You don't need their approval to be who you are. Without the pressure of fitting into their mold, you begin discovering your own values, passions, and priorities. You start making choices based on what truly matters to you, not what others expect from you. This is the beginning of true self-discovery. Rejection pushes you to build inner strength. When you lose family support, it can feel like you've lost your foundation. But what if that foundation was shaky to begin with? What if the support you thought you had was actually conditional, only available if you followed their rules? True strength doesn't come from external validation. It comes from within. Many people never develop this inner strength because they've never been forced to stand on their own. But when rejection happens, you have two choices. Let it break you. Let it build you. Chew. Every time you survive another wave of disappointment, loneliness, or self-doubt, you get stronger. You realize that your worth is not defined by who accepts or rejects you. You start relying on your own resilience rather than waiting for others to lift you up. And one day you look back and realize what once hurt you has now made you unshakable. Rejection helps you find the right people. Sometimes family rejection is painful because it makes you feel completely alone. But here's something important to remember. Just because your biological family rejects you doesn't mean you won't find a family. There is a difference between blood family and soul family. Blood family is determined by birth. You don't get to choose them. Soul family is made up of the people who truly understand, support, and love you for who you are. Rejection creates space for better connections. When you stop trying to fit into a family that doesn't accept you, you open yourself up to relationships that are genuine and fulfilling. You start finding people who respect your boundaries, value your uniqueness, and celebrate your growth. These might be friends, mentors, a spiritual community, or even a future family of your own. And when you find them, you'll realize something incredible. You were never truly alone. You were just waiting for the right people to find you. Shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Painful experiences often carry hidden lessons. Rejection teaches resilience, self-worth, and independence. It forces you to become your own supporter rather than relying on others for validation. Stop seeking approval from those who reject you. One of the biggest mistakes people make after rejection is chasing after those who rejected them. They beg for acceptance, try to prove themselves, or shrink back into the version of themselves that their family wants. But here's the truth. If someone rejects you for being your authentic self, winning back their approval means losing yourself. Stop fighting for validation from people who refuse to see your worth. Instead, focus on validating yourself. What if it's actually a redirection towards something better? Maybe this rejection is pushing you toward becoming stronger and more independent, discovering your true identity, finding people who genuinely support you, developing inner peace and self-love, creating a life that aligns with your deepest values. Not everyone will understand your journey. Not everyone will support your growth, and that's okay. Because in the end, the people who truly love you will never require you to sacrifice yourself to make them comfortable. So let go of the need for approval. Let go of the pain of rejection, and step into the person you were always meant to be. Because sometimes rejection isn't a punishment, it's an invitation to find your true path.